This is a clouds weather alert.
Good late Tuesday, early Wednesday, meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. I know we're keeping it in alert mode here because not necessarily a big local impact, or maybe not really a direct local impact from freezing rain in our covered area, but up toward the north could be a very significant southern winter storm event here coming up this weekend. There'll be some very heavy snow totals. There'll be sleet, but then the freezing rain could be very serious, maybe devastating. We'll get into more of that in a moment. I know the only areas in our viewing circle that could get in on the freezing rain toward that Sunday are around Albany or so northward it would look like. I know there have been some adjustments to the forecast even here tonight, pushing that further north a bit based on some of the latest model data that's as it comes into alignment here. They're still a little ways out though, so we got to monitor things, but it's more for areas to the north, area. We had the snow on Sunday toward Albany and toward some of those other southwest Georgia communities, and then in Florida, mainly west of our covered area. But, the snow, that was generally about fun. This weekend, well, some areas could have fun with snow, but a lot of areas there could see a crippling ice storm, a crippling freezing rain precipitation event. Just not what you want to hear, not good news at all. And we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. Again, very concerned for some of our neighbors here toward the north and the west. There's still some model variability, but we got to take this as a weather community and as, really just a country very seriously, because there could be, hundreds of thousands of power outages as we're looking toward multiple states. You add that up, and we could be talking about 1 million people, maybe more. Hate to go into any more numbers than that, but don't want to get too specific yet. But in terms of that, that's really hard to forecast this far out. But the idea of it, whether we don't know, maybe where it's going to set up yet, but where the overall ice event's going to set up in terms of the meteorology. But we really have to be just very vigilant here and very concerned for our neighbors generally, not necessarily within our 62 counties, with the exception of maybe a few in those northern fringes. We'll watch for lower end impacts, but could be a very high impact event toward the weekend, toward the north. We're talking about Atlanta, Dallas, Nashville, points in between there. Really got to be paying attention, and we're going to do that here at Clouds Weather. But you see locally right now, if you're watching live here at 2 a.m., it's in the 30s toward Keystone 34. I know east of Stark we have frost type of advisories in play, but in our rural area we're down to 29. It's just the way things are when you're in a more rural area, when we have the winds really dying down, you have a clear night here, you don't have too much cloud cover in general. I know there is some around, as I'll pull up the satellite here. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about momentarily. But it's not something that's just overwhelming here. So that does definitely help some areas get a little bit cooler. You don't have that concrete around and the like. So that's why there's about 5-degree difference there. And as you're looking like toward where we're at here, you used to start 29. You see some other areas here, 36 Tallahassee, 32 Albany. I know there's been a lot going on, but last Friday morning we had our lowest reading since I've been keeping tabs of the temperatures here east of Stark and Davis weather station. I know I posted about it there in the 6:30ish time frame there. Friday morning we were down to 18.4, which rounds down to 18, and we got all the way down to 17.5, which rounds up to 18 there. So the lowest I've had on my Davis weather station since keeping tabs of the daily data there since 2021, keeping tabs, on the low temperature, the lowest lows. We had like 19 or so. I believe that was one where we were, at maybe 18.9, but which is rounding up to 19, but getting all the way down to 17.5 there on the thermometer Friday morning. Very impressive, very cold, though, not really that impactful, other than some concerns with pipes and things like that. Nothing like, we had that snow Sunday, which was somewhat impactful for some, but in a good way for a lot of folks. But as we look ahead in the timeline, we're going to have something very serious. Don't know exactly where it's going to set up yet. There's, again, some model variability, but I'll try to get into some of that here in a few minutes. There's a lot going on with that. But let's real quick look back here towards some of that wintry weather on that Sunday here. First off, let's go ahead and look back here toward that Florida snow. That was exciting. One of those areas there, toward that Florida panhandle, getting closer out there towards spots like the Phoenix Springs. and we'll take a look back at some of that live coverage that we had here for you on that clouds weather stream there Sunday morning, that Florida 511 perspective. So we're going to show you a bunch of views here over the next few hours, and we're going to start off here just at Phoenix Springs right now. This is Florida snow here. You see it accumulating in the median, not so much on the pavement, and that's what we want to see. We do not want it to accumulate on the pavement, but it's accumulating there on the grassy surfaces. This is in the Phoenix Springs live on the Florida 511 camera perspective. Just incredible to see Florida snow there as we were looking, out toward areas and mainly west of the area in Florida. I know things didn't, quite set up there toward our covered area. Mariana had some snow, but didn't really get it too much in the Florida covered area. Georgia, though, that was a different story as we showed you guys, in the timeline there. As we were on, giving you the minute by minute information, we were talking straight there for about 4 hours or so. Had the stream going for over 4 hours, and look at some of that snow there in Dougherty County now from a Georgia 511 perspective. Pretty much whiteout conditions here. Let's go back to that live shot out of Acre there in Dougherty County. This is, unbelievable, really. I mean, we thought it could happen like this. I mean, 8 miles from rain, to this. Snow globe pretty much there. It's that delineation of the atmospheric profile and the temperatures. Just incredible to see that. That was mostly about fun. Some areas will have fun from snow. So a lot of areas could get like a foot, as we're looking toward maybe parts of Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, somewhere around there in between. But, areas on the southern side are going to have some very serious consequences. Now, I'm not going to see the exact totals on what I'm about to say here, but I'm going to pull up some model guidances. Just the precipitation type on the 0Z GFS, the American model, and I've been looking at the latest Euro, as well, that 0Z, and that's what, it helps us, out here, and really is the reasoning behind coming on a little bit later than maybe, other folks do here. We can see that latest model guidance, and there's definitely been a shift northward in the weather modeling here. We're going to go ahead and show you. So today's the 21st, I know. As we're looking at things, we'll start off on the 23rd. I know FSU basketball got a great win tonight down in Miami. That was exciting. Their next game will be in Texas. They're scheduled anyway for Saturday against SMU. I'm not sure that's going to happen because of the wintry weather that could be in play out there. Already a winter storm watch and play as a last check out that way. And there's a lot of details to be refined, but we'll look here starting Friday morning. That's the pre-sip, but then the actual type, you already see stuff in Oklahoma there. But the weekend is the bigger story because of all the ice that we're going to be tracking here. That freezing rain could be, devastating in some spots, crippling, catastrophic. We don't know exactly where, but somewhere it's probably going to have it, and that is about the worst ice storm they ever had. And I don't mean to say that, to hype things up, but it's just very serious. The spots, are going to have it pretty bad. Other spots will get lucky. So we shall see exactly how that's, evolved. It's a very big geographic area. We're talking about a very big temperature contrast. We're going to be near 80 degrees here around dark on Sunday, while our neighbors around north of Albany could be dealing with freezing rain. That is just an unbelievable difference. Now, everybody will get in the colder areas. We start early next week, that work week. But we see here, this is a 7 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Central Friday. We progress this out. You already see some of that mixed precip in there. Not what folks want to see, obviously. You have the sleet, you have the freezing rain. You're looking there, the pinks, the purples on the map, the white snow, of course, and then you have, as we progress this further and further, we get toward early Saturday. You see all the snow, that's going to be, very significant snow in some spots. Could be record, type of snow, but that's bad, in some ways, because it will make people, in the South, you have to stay at home, and there could be some issues, people not being able to get out with emergency calls, but the ice could be much worse. The, ice, the freezing rain could be just something that the totals we're talking about, a half inch or more thick of ice in some areas is likely. Honestly, models have shown a lot more than that in some cases. But let's just stick with a half inch or more for the nomenclature right now on that, because that's still very bad. Widespread power outages as we progress this here. This is, early Saturday morning here as we look and as we track things here. The 24th, you see all this mixed precip in here, and that's not a good thing. Sleet isn't as bad as freezing rain, but we're going to have a lot of freezing rain, it would look like here, as we look and as we track things here later on in toward the timeline. You can see here, this is into early Sunday morning now, and some of that's bordering our northern counties there, of course. And you can just see here, this is a big mess. A big old mess over a wide area. I mean, I haven't zoomed out really far, and you still don't see the full extent of the snow all the way to New York. It's going to be a huge geographic area. It could be, it's not a guarantee. Things can change. Things have changed tonight in the model, and I haven't really made a big deal about it yet because, in terms of like going over like totals here because things have been shifting, and we gotta hope things shift in a positive direction. Some spots they have, some spots they have gotten worse. But this could be one of the worst winter storms we've had in the country in living memory. To be quite honest, I don't say that, don't take saying that lightly here. This is very concerning, but we don't know the exact details. And some folks, you're going to say it wasn't that bad here. Other folks, it's going to be the worst winter storm of their life. And to be quite honest, you're going to have to get maybe in that interior room, not in our area, but somewhere, maybe in Alabama, Georgia, North Georgia, somewhere. It could be Tennessee or Louisiana, Mississippi, or Texas, North Texas. We don't know yet. But some folks may have to get in their interior room for a while because there'll be, we've heard stories in the weather community over the decades that literally at night you just hear all the trees crack and snap, and because of the weight of the ice, the power equipment breaking there, and some of that, obviously if that were to fall on your home, it's like a tornado in some ways, not with the wind speeds, but with all that falling, you just gotta hope it doesn't. But if it does, that gives you the best chance there of, reducing the injury risk. Obviously, there's still significant danger if you have a tree fall in your home. That can be deadly, obviously. Mobile home, or, site-built home, whatever. It can be deadly, depending on where you're at. But your interior room, you're further away from the trees in theory. I mean, obviously, if you see trees leaning in a certain spot, maybe try to take care of those as quick as possible. But, also, if you see that, then maybe you try to get in a spot where you don't really have anything leaning. So maybe it's a little, not exactly the most interior or something, because it's not going to be the wind that's extreme. Now, I'll put the wind up on here real quick. I mean, there will be some wind, but that's not the story with this. We're talking about just incredible total. I mean, this is I told you it's Friday, and we're talking about Saturday. This is just early Sunday here, and then I'll keep progressing this. This is the Sunday afternoon. You still see stuff here early Monday, and it's just adding to the totals, adding to the impact here. This is Monday morning, so we talk about the weekend, but it's going to be edging over into Friday and the Monday as well. The weekend will probably be the worst in general, but just a terrible, terrible set of circumstances here, in terms of some spots, in terms of the ice totals, again, over a half inch in a lot of spots. Model data is going actually quite a bit worse than that. Again, we don't know where that's going to set up the corridor of it yet, but a lot of folks with, power outages that could be long lasting there, our neighbors, our friends there. I'll back this up again and just kind of show you what we're talking about here. This is early Sunday morning. Some of the worst of this, well, the totals, I know you see Houston in here, they have a meteorology conference scheduled coming up. Their totals may not be as high because of the way the rain rates, the precip rates, that is, that'll be setting up down there. But as we look to the northeast, see Shreveport, Monroe, Little Rock, Memphis in here, Jackson, Tennessee. I remember, last summer visiting that Casey Jones Museum. That was interesting. Unfortunately, there was some big impacts coming their way. You can see Nashville there. You can see Knoxville, Atlanta, Greenville, South Carolina, Columbia, Charlotte, Raleigh. Just a bad set of circumstances potentially. And the snow will be bad enough, and that it could be very significant. We could be seeing foot totals or more in Arkansas, Tennessee, and or Kentucky in that vicinity, maybe Virginia in there as well. It's just going to be a massive and impactful winter storm. We know, again, the worst, we don't know where it's going to be, but we know some places are going to get it very, very bad. Snow, foot of snow in the south's not great. It can be, deadly, of course, in some cases, but the ice is much, much, much worse. It's catastrophic potentially. We're talking about just totals that could be in some spots, again, over a half inch thick. Again, don't want to go over exact totals, but some models here, I don't, in the weather community have actually shown totals, well over an inch of ice thick here, and that would, a tenth of an inch. We had in Tallahassee in 2014. Some spots didn't even have that. When I was there, that was a big deal. Classes were canceled, slick roads, and that type of issue. You can start to have power outages. You could have 10 times that, maybe more than that in some spots here as we look ahead in the timeline. 10 times that thick. That's going to just weigh on those trees and bring them down. In a lot of cases there, power lines, power poles, that power equipment are going to have big problems here. It would seem just the weight of that ice. It's hard to understand here in Florida and Georgia. I used to not understand it, South Georgia, talking about our covered area, because it's not something we really deal with. But just learning over the years in meteorology, that weight of that ice, I know you've maybe heard about it. It's been over a decade, but there was a bad ice storm in Kentucky. I believe it was 2-inch thick ice there. I want to say 2009 off the top of my head. And we had, it was a relatively confined area, and there were a lot of fatalities, people not using the generators properly, if I recall, and we're going to have really cold air back behind this here, too. As we show you here, I know we had that storm in 21 in Texas that was bad, but this could be, something that's just over numerous states here. It'll be more widespread. I'm not saying it's going to be worse. Some areas won't get it near that bad. It's just hyper local. Other areas may get it worse in Texas, but don't think it's going to extend as far down, because the whole state was like, just the whole state was under that huge impact then. It won't be everybody in Texas now, but a huge range, in terms of geography. Look at the temperatures on Sunday. We're talking about near 80 around Stark, over 80 around central South Florida in that red. And then you see in Atlanta, they're going to be in the 20s in that pinkish, or not pink, in that light bluish color, I guess, or maybe purplish color. The light blue border in our area is in the 30s, but as we look here, you see how warm it is on Sunday, and then as we progress here, though, we're talking about, this is Monday morning. These purples here, these are some nasty readings close to zero. The pinks are below zero in general here. So we could see below zero temperatures in Tennessee and Kentucky, in theory, in the wake of this, and wind chills, let me put the wind on here. There's, not everybody's going to have the extreme. It's not going to be extreme winds, but enough, to make it feel even colder is what I'm saying. This is just going to be a really, really big deal. It could have the impact in terms of the cost value, in terms of the power outages. That's going to be worse than some landfalling U.S. hurricanes over the years and the decades. So this is a really big deal. I just want you to prepare. You need to stock up on that milk and bread if you're in the impact area. Now, I'll run this ad, and I've already seen it on. I may stop it here at some point because our system doesn't take it as far out as I can look. We're going to have another winter weather potential the following weekend. It's way, way early on that, though. As I'm just progressing this out here, I'm just trying to throw some cold air in here in the southeast the following weekend here to GFS. But as we see, just going through this really quick here, it'll be something we'll have to watch the following weekend as we look here and, just watch the different precip types. But it kind of stops before it shows all of it, but you kind of get the idea. I don't really want to show all of it, to be quite honest, because there's too much uncertainty, but you see the colder. You see some of those pinks there. Could be talking about some readings there. These show just above zero here, but the pinks near and or just above, just below 0 degrees with the actual air temperature, and that's going to make it very, very hard. Anything under 32, I'm talking about Fahrenheit still around 0. Anything staying under 32 for a while, it's going to be very hard to get the ice, the freezing rain, all that melt. The snow, of course. That's going to make it very hard for that to melt. And that's going to be very, very, very problematic here, because it's going to prolong the event, prolong the risks of power crews. It might take them, longer to be able to get out there and repair the damaged equipment. I know we do have some wintry weather right now here around Chicago. They're used to that, the snow up there right now. This is not, something that is just an extraordinary event, obviously. Going to check to see what type of alerts we have up there, because some folks might be watching with an interest, but that's not, our focal point. There are some winter weather alerts in play as we look up that way, winter weather advisories and the like. But yeah, they can handle this up there in general. Still got to be careful, localized spots, but going to be something that's just very serious coming up toward this weekend. as we look and as we track things here. Let me go ahead and run down some of the details on this as we continue along, continue to track things. Again, it was all about, mostly fun, on Sunday. This coming weekend could be the complete, 180 of that could be just terrible as we look toward the weekend here, toward the north. Not as much about our local area this time. It's going to be cold, but, maybe our far northern fringes, but a tenth of an inch of ice, still impactful, still could cause accidents, sure, in our northern fringes, but areas to the north could see way more than that. This situation needs to be monitored very closely. Please stay tuned for the latest. Gotta be watching. I gotta be watching for friends and family myself up toward the north. This, you guys need to be doing the same if you're not in the impact area, but anybody. And this, I had to add like Kentucky in here tonight for the ice part of this. There's snow part too. That's something. It's going to be a lot to handle, but it might be able to be handled. The ice, if we get as much as some of the models are showing, the forecast models here, it's not going to be able to be handled. I mean, nowhere can handle the type of ice we're seeing. Some of the model and Mississippi could have it bad. I mean, there's just so many different possibilities. Could be multiple spots with some, terrible problems. Somewhere, in between from Texas, Oklahoma to Arkansas to Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky to South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. I know it's late at night if you're watching live. I don't mean to scare you. I just want you to be prepared here. I don't know if I've already ever used this here, but you know, I remember hearing this around when COVID started, and it's something that, it's one thing, to say this, but it's really, you want to be prepared, not scared here. That's the type of deal we're, seeing in the modeling right now. It's something, the numbers, the ice numbers, snow numbers, that can be fun for the kids, some school days. They don't have to, go in, and if you're just playing it safe, a lot of snow could be a lot of fun. But if we get ice like what we're seeing in the modeling, you really, really got to make sure your emergency supply kit is up to date. Extended power outages will be possible, if not likely. In some of these spots here, charge up devices and generators may be necessary. But, those home ones are better because, we're looking at a situation, where we are seeing here a carbon monoxide risk possible from some types here, as we're seeing things. As we're watching that, and you just want to consider stocking up on items like milk and bread. May need extra blankets if you're headed out. If you have to head out, you may get stranded on the road, and really, you could have trees falling all over the place in some spots. Not everybody in there, but some spots you need to, be prepared to be stranded on the side of the road. Sadly, for a long time, if you have to go out in these conditions, and then you have an accident, people might not be able to get to you. Again, it's not going to be everybody in that zone from Texas to Virginia, but some spots are going to get it very bad, it would seem. And if the significant freezing rain accumulations occur, we're talking about a crippling ice storm, major damage to trees and power equipment could occur, and numerous accidents are likely. Bridges could be very slick, and major roads may be shut down for a long period of time. Schools could be out for days, weeks. In some cases here, not everybody in these states are going to get it that bad. Some spots are going to get it, really bad, though. Power could be out days or weeks even. In the worst case here, if they verify, then we hope the models shift. Sometimes the models don't pick up on things that good, even though they're all showing this, they've been shifting around. Maybe things are going to get better here in the models. It won't be as bad. But if we see the numbers we're seeing, I talk about over an inch of ice thick, and some spots. If the worst case scenario verifies, be prepared to move to an interior room or a basement for a time, because all the trees and everything falling around you, maybe be, ready to take those tornado precautions even. Again, this is so early, and, I don't want to scare anybody, but I got to tell you what the models are showing. They've been showing this since about, right after we got there on Sunday, started seeing it, and they have, they moved it around some, but they haven't wavered, and just extraordinary numbers. You got to be ready to put that bicycle helmet on even. Some, shelters probably even be open because of the situation here, but, the bicycle helmet and protect you from falling debris around you even. And then we're mostly slow. Snow, though, it could be more about staying safe or having fun. Not everybody's going to have it just, awful like this. There will be points and spots where people can have fun. There could be some ice mixing in, but some spots are just going to have it, don't know where yet. Some spots, will get lucky. You're going to say it wasn't that bad. Some spots are going to say it's the worst weather event of their life. Maybe worse than any tornado nearby, unless they got hit by a tornado directly, or and these aren't mostly spots by the coast here. A lot of folks are going to say it's worse than any type of storm system they've ever been through. Hurricane that's went inland or something. This could be the worst weather event of some people's lives here. Sadly, as we're looking and as we're tracking things, that's why we're in alert mode, even though it's not going to mostly be an impact in our area. Don't always, this winter weather storm, the contrast in temperatures is going to be very high. Precip rates in here, and if that's ice, it's going to be very quickly, growing, ice on the lines, maybe like Saturday night in Georgia or something at night, possibly North Georgia, talking more than anything at the moment. Central Georgia, we'll watch some of the models that kind of showed more of that earlier on. They're kind of shifting north though with that, but we'll see. And that's why I'm trying to avoid going really specific on all the different totals, because not everybody's going to have the crippling, disastrous ice storm, but some people almost are, assured to have it. But as temperatures warm, I know you got to watch out for potentially a dangerous falling ice, and in addition to that slip and fall risk there. As we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things. I know the power crews here, you got to think folks are already getting that ready for mutual aid, to other states here because of what we're seeing in the modeling to try to help, restore power, be in a spot where you don't maybe have, as bad a conditions, and be ready to get to the spot where the conditions are really, treacherous there as quick as, when it's safe for the crews to do so to restore power. Maybe, aftermath of some bad hurricanes, have to rebuild the power grid in some areas here again. I generally wouldn't say this far out. It's not, we don't know exactly where, but we kind of know the time frame, and we know, the wide region. It's going to be points within this zone that I'm highlighting here. You would think we're going to see stuff like that because the models, the forecast models, they're not wavering. I mean, there's already winter storm watches, which they never assume this early afterward, like Texas and Louisiana. Let me see. Arkansas, they never assume 3 days out like this. And it shows you there's a lot of confidence here. Oklahoma in there. And nothing's been upgraded to a warning yet. I was curious. I don't know if they'll do that yet. Probably a little later, but maybe in the afternoon or something on that Wednesday. But house fire more common in these situations. You got to watch out for space heaters, candles there, pipe problems as well. This could burst in a lot of cases, because it would be so cold for so long in the aftermath of this potentially. You got to just try to stay warm somehow, in the aftermath of this. If the power's out for a while, that, people can be running their generators, and then that can lead to fatalities because of the carbon monoxide poisoning risk. If the roads are eventually clear enough to be able to get out, you got to remember to treat intersections as four-way stops if the traffic lights are still out. So again, this is something that's really serious. Again, I don't know if I've probably never had to talk about a winter storm this serious here before in the country from what we're seeing in the modeling now. I'm just trying to be honest. I don't want to just if the models are showing it here for this long, we're not exactly showing the spots, but it's going to be hard for meteorology and the meteorological processes to sift enough here to help us out, here by the time we, get in toward that weekend. Somewhere, some spots are going to be, I'm not saying the exact spots, and I know I'm almost like nervous saying all this because there's just so much here, but some spots are gonna get it really bad. Some spots are gonna get lucky. We're not sure exactly where that's going to be, but in that general corridor from Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, through South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, somewhere in that's gonna have some really terrible problems. It would seem snow on the northern fringes, even north of the south, really what you'd call the south, but I know. Just gotta be really careful. As we go ahead and say here, key messages from the National Weather Service there. Widespread heavy snow and dangerous ice expected Friday through the weekend. I'm focusing on the weekend, but later Friday could be an issue. Some spots too. They're already saying there that moderate impacts in red is on the top map there. they're confident in modern impacts, at least in all those spots. I mean, that even gets in West Virginia, and there's all that terrain impact. I don't know if you really call West Virginia the South there, but you just see so many spots, and I think Georgia, South Carolina are going to see more of that fill in as confidence grows. That's the northern parts, and western part of North Carolina, but northern parts of Georgia, South Carolina. As we track this, as we monitor this here, and we had a winter storm last year about this time, around that anniversary. But this one, in terms of the national implications, not Florida, but the national implications are going to be much, much worse, it would seem. I'll kind of read some of this verbatim. An expansive winter storm will produce a swath of heavy snow, sleet, and freezing rain from the southern Rockies to plains and the mid-south starting Friday and sifting toward the east coast to Sunday. Extreme cold in the wake of this could prolong the snow and ice, as we've alluded to. Heavy snow, the northern portion of the precipitation field will consist of heavy snow there, most likely from the southern Rockies and south central plains on east to the mid-Atlantic. Snow-covered roads and reduced visibilities are among the primary hazards expected within the dangerous ice. Yeah, dangerous. Freezing rain. Broad swaths of freezing rain and sleet are expected south of the all-snow zone over the southern plains, mid-south, and parts of the Carolinas. Hazardous travel conditions, power outages, and tree damage all are likely. There's some uncertainty. Confidence is high on the storm, happening here, but low on the exact storm track timing and precipitation amounts. Start preparations now for an impactful winter storm and keep updated with the Weather Service, with me here, with your local meteorologists in these local markets here as well. They have really important insight into some of the local, characteristics, comparing it to past events in the local TV markets, how it impacts certain roads, the geography. Very important to be paying attention here to the meteorology community. In the days ahead, we'll have special coverage as needed. This is something like, you see the geographic stretch here. It's very concerning. So you see this here. This is a freezing rain example on a Wednesday back in January the 29th there of 2014 at FSU. Toward Leon County. See, this was about maybe a tenth of an inch in general of accumulating freezing rain. But we're talking about in the examples as we look ahead here, what I'm alluding to, instead of a tenth of an inch, we're talking about maybe 5-10 times that thick, and the weight of all that's going to bring a lot of stuff down. Trees, power lines, just all over the place. Different types of precip. I kind of went through this one real quick, but you see snowflakes, they never melt. Sleet there, that's something that some folks will contend with. That's not as bad as freezing rain, not near as bad. Not fun like snow can be, but freezing rain, the worst type of precip you can have. It freezes on contact with the surface. So really got to be paying attention there. Really got to be very mindful as we look ahead and toward the timeline. I know looking back there, last year we had that winter weather event right on that anniversary, so let's do a quick flashback, do a little bit of that coverage. Really accumulating here. These are going to be visuals we remember in some cases for a lifetime here, making those lifetime memories, but you also got to stay safe with all that ice because that can be very hazardous, obviously. Just flashing back on that there as we look here, now looking at some of the graphics. The freezing rain, the sleet there back in 2014, comparing that. We had freezing rain during the day in general, sleet at night. The sleet, that wasn't something, that was as slick as bad, but that freezing rain, you can see it on that table example, that's from the old Union. On the left, on the right table, that's from Alfurnace Treasure Library, not too far from Cawthon Hall. And now the precip, this is talking about the actual precipitation. As we look ahead, the actual type of it's a combination of all of it. And you see how heavy things are going to be. This is talking about 3 inches there of total precip. Some of it's going to be sleet, some of it's going to be freezing rain, some of it's going to be snow, some of it may actually be rain. But this gives you an idea of some of the areas that could be hardest hit. Really anybody in that red, maroon, purple, that could shift around some. And it's a little misleading because on northern fringes you only need about a tenth of what you're going to have. So with snow, let's just say if you get an inch of precip, it could end up being 10 inches of snow. So with ice, it's not quite like that, but it's not going to be like that because you can't just multiply things out like 10. It's not how thick it'll be, but it's still, this is a lot of, actual precip here to be falling when we have this cold of weather. This is scary. As we go ahead and look something a lot funner real quick, you can see here toward Indiana winning that title. That was so exciting there. They're going to have their celebration scheduled on Saturday. Hopefully the weather will be okay for that. Further up, maybe more snow. We'll see how the weather impacts that there, the timeline and the like. But that was a great win. They beat Miami. The only change here on my top 7 was moving around Ohio State and putting them ahead of Ole Miss, thinking about how Indiana and Miami, that's the 2 teams that Ohio State lost to. I have Notre Dame way higher than everybody else because I really think they would have been right there. I think if they'd have played again, Notre Dame would have beat Miami in the Indiana game. They could have beat Indiana, but Indiana is the undisputed national champion. No question about it. We don't have that every year in college football. We have a lot of weather concerns, but we're thankful for that. For once we have an undisputed national champion in college football. I mean, you could argue it. 2 years ago, FSU should have, been right there. Notre Dame, I know you could say they should have been in the playoff. They should have been. They could have won it, but Indiana's the only undefeated team. Everybody else has, as you see on this board here, as you're looking, as you're tracking things, just multiple losses in this view. Indiana's the undefeated champion. What a great story. Best maybe ever in sports. Curt Cignetti, Fernando Mendoza, Charlie Becker. You can go on and on about that team. Aiden Fisher there. Just so many, incredible players and incredible team. The oldest coach ever to do it in college football there. He surpassed Bobby Bowden. I know his dad learned from the late Bobby Bowden there, and his late dad did. And now the oldest to win the first national title was Curt Cignetti. I believe he's about a year older or so than Bobby Bowden was when he won his first national title, both in their 60s when they did that. In 1993 for Coach Bowden there, and then this year here for Coach Cignetti. 1993 season for Coach Bowden anyway. And then first new national champion in college football, not a team that had won it before in college football since Steve Spurrier in Florida in 1996. When they won their first title, every year after that, it's been one of the teams that won in the past. And FSU had won their first title in 93, so not too far behind, but haven't had, a team that was not a repeat champion here at some point in history since Florida did it and Coach Spurrier back in 1996. So some incredible stats there related to the local area. You see our local area here. Again, our concern with the red logo is not necessarily about the local area this time, about points north. We're very concerned. And then as you see here, looking toward the planning forecast, you can see just low rain chances early on, around freezing some spots. We started to get above average here pretty quick and closer to 80 here as we approach an end of the weekend. But then by Sunday is a very complicated forecast for the local areas. We are in up and down temperature pattern I alluded to in the description. 60% chance of that precip on Sunday. Most of that will be rain this time around, it would seem like. And our far northern areas could be freezing rain and the temperature to be much colder. Could have temperatures close to freezing up north. While you see to the south, we're going to have temperatures. I tried to split the difference a little, but we're pushing it way more toward the Stark number. We're going to be close to 80 here around Stark on Sunday. Like in Georgia, points of the day could be freezing rain. That's crazy. You see Monday there, getting cooler there. Some spots cold, and then Tuesday morning downright cold there. Freeze, maybe a hard freeze by Tuesday morning. We'll see. A little bit up in the air on that. We see us struggling to get out of the 40s there. So very chilly air, but still nothing like what our neighbors could see up toward the north. Again, I have to be honest about the weather, what we're seeing in the modeling. We gotta hope it shifts. Hope's not a plan. There's still a little bit of time for it to shift here, but it's like a hurricane pretty much in terms of the modeling. We're a few days out here, and we got to be preparing. We got to be taking this seriously. This is about as bad of a winter storm as you can ever have here in terms of the meteorology right now. We just got to hope something shifts in terms of that ice storm there, that freezing rain. It's looking so substantial, so serious here. It's hard to put, into words how serious this storm could be as we look ahead into the timeline. And I'm not trying to hype it up. I'm just stating, the facts based on analogs and history and just the model guidance, putting that all together and thinking about the, different impacts of local geography as We'll leave you with this graphic one more time. The situation's got to be monitored very closely. You got to start, in some of these spots, especially under that winter storm watch. Go ahead and start stocking up on that milk and bread. Don't overstock per se, but get enough to last there for a week or so. In hurricanes we talk about getting out of water. You want to do that too, maybe, but milk and bread in the cold, that's something that if you don't have refrigeration, that's when we talk about that. You don't need refrigeration for that. If your house is getting colder and colder, I mean, you do need for the milk, but the point is, it'll already be getting colder and colder in the house. So, if you get what I'm saying there, it's something to bear in mind. You may need extra blankets there too. So, that's something. Just go ahead and start stocking up here into that winter storm watch that we're seeing in like states of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and that's going to be expanded. We're going to have winter storm watch all over the place, no doubt. So people need to be stocking up on that stuff. Be prepared. I never get to the store for a week, give or take in some cases here. After the power's out, the roads are closed. This could be a big problem there. Schools will be closed for a while, it seems, in some of these spots. So, very serious situation. For now, meteorologist Casey Cloud, we're going to keep our neighbors to the north in our thoughts and prayers, as this weekend could be a terrible, terrible situation. We got to hope it improves. We got to hope it gets better. But for now, I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud. Start preparing. If you're to the north, our area generally will be okay. Our northern fringes could have some freezing rain, but it's not to this type of level where it's, crippling. But we're going to be watching, we'll be tracking, and we'll give you the latest here. Next update is late Thursday or late Friday, unless we need to pop back in earlier. Otherwise, have a great night here.